My name is Guy Dinmore. I'm a journalist based in Wales, and I've been commissioned by IPS to interview you. And congratulations on your new appointments as the new Director General of IITA and Regional Director of Continental Africa for CGIAR. Can I ask you, what are your research and development priorities for IITA and for CGIAR in Africa? And what is your vision for Africa? What do you want to achieve during your term? Thank you.
No, thank you very much. First of all, I think it's important to mention the situation in which we are. The food security situation in Africa goes unabated. Year after year, it's becoming quite worse. And I can say that from 1961 to now, the number of people who are going hungry has increased significantly, by 40% or so. And so the challenge continues to be very high. And these food insecurity situations are being exacerbated by the Russia-Ukraine war. So more than ever, the role of the CGIAR, the role of IITA becomes even more important to make sure that we have available technologies needed to improve food production, food access, and also food utilization. So to answer your question specifically in terms of our priorities, with the impact of climate change, I think focusing on climate smart agriculture is an area that we want to focus on. Do good agronomy, develop varieties, technology that can be resilient to climate change. We also want to develop a research agenda that focuses on the crop diversity, improving genetic innovation. This is quite important for our research. And also research on breeding for nutrition, because nutrition is quite an important part of our livelihood. So if we can breed crop in a way that they can improve the nutrition status of people, I think we'll go a long way. There are also research on fighting pests and diseases. That also is quite important. Diseases with the change in the climate, we have, and also the ecosystem changes, crops are being impacted. It's important to also do research on plant health. And these are the kind of research that I think IITA and the CGIAR should be focusing on. So my vision is a thriving agricultural food systems in Africa that's bringing, accelerating and improving the livelihood condition of people in rural areas. That's the vision that I have. In terms of specifically the CGIAR and IITA, my vision is to have also a center, an institute where we have high quality scientists, where people are quite excited to be able to do research to improve the food security situations in Africa, a center where people will be really excited to come out and work. And also a center where we have transparency in management, where we have gender equality, and a center that can be looked upon by people outside as the sort of reference in Africa. So I would like to continue the path of my predecessor in positioning IITA as the center of excellence in Africa that can provide solution to food security in Africa.
Excellent. So moving on, now, as you say, the challenges are growing. The World Food Programme said last month that multiple emergencies, and you mentioned Ukraine and Russia, had overlapped, creating the largest and most complex hunger and humanitarian crisis in more than 70 years. And the FAO said in its 2022 report that the world is moving backwards in its efforts to end hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. So you're clearly coming to your new post at a most difficult time. You have set out your vision, but how do you think IITA and CGIAR have to adapt to what really are these downturns in the situation?
No, thank you for the question. The situation currently is indeed aggravating. We see with the population growth, with a lot of people migrating from the rural to urban area, the need for food is really accelerating and increasing. And we see a lot of humanitarian crisis. I mentioned the impact of climate change, the heat, the flood that's happening, like in West Africa, for example, or the drought in Eastern Africa, is creating a lot of crisis in many countries. People are getting displaced. So basically, CGIAR and IITA need to adapt to the new situation. Basically, we have to be able to respond quickly by providing developing research that can provide quickly variety that can actually mature rapidly and make them available to the people for them to be able to consume the food that's needed. So we need to be able to accelerate our research in a way that can respond to the needs of the people. Mm-hmm. So we need to be able to combine, I would say, long-term research with short-term research. Short-term in the sense that we can also respond to the needs of people. But more importantly, we also have technologies that are available in the shelves that we need to be able to deploy quickly, make them available. And those techniques are there. Unfortunately, there are many constraints, not necessarily related to research, but lack of extension systems, policy constraints or barriers related to trade or transportation system, and so on, that are actually preventing the technology for going to where they are needed. So the CGIAR will need to be able to adapt itself in order to not only do long-term research, but ensuring that we can do research with a quick result that can help communities to be able to adopt them, and also help policymakers by making a variety that are highly quickly, that can mature quickly and make them available to the consumers and the communities. So I can see an area where the CGIAR and IITA will be working with humanitarian organizations like the World Food Program, the FAO, UNHCR, and others, to deliver a program for the populations.
Thank you. So yeah, you've mentioned the climate crisis, which is obviously an extreme weather events, the droughts and the floods in different parts of Africa. My third question was whether it is the climate crisis that will drive the agenda at IITA and CGIAR in Africa, or whether the bigger issues are actually still more political in terms of land rights, women's rights, budgets for agriculture.
Yes, I mean, the climate agenda is phenomenal. We cannot ignore it. It is there. We see drought in Eastern Africa. We see famine. We see floods in West and Central Africa that are destroying land. And this is happening, and we cannot remain inactive or silent in front of this kind of situation. So the CGIAR becomes quite important. But as you said, it's not enough. The policy environment is quite important. So that's where the long tenure becomes quite significant. So women, for example, need to have access to land. There are some areas where the inheritance system prevents women to have access or to inherit land to be able to produce. We ought to be able to do some research to try to find solutions and policy recommendations that can help farmers, especially women and youth, to have access to land. That's one area that I think is quite important. But there are also other policy areas that we need to be able to focus on. There are policies that are actually preventing people from access, to technologies. For example, lack of extension systems that we need to be able to work on. But as you said quite well, we see situation where we have a land grabbing and the land is being taken away from some people, and it's quite important to ensure that the communities have access to those lands. So we cannot divorce the policy questions from the bigger agenda about addressing the climate. The two go together. So as an international research institute, also as CGIAR, we will be making contribution in providing analysis about the policy options that can be proposed to improve access to land, to improve, if you want, investment in agriculture by the policymakers, but also at the same time ensuring that we also are doing the research that's needed to combat or to be resilient to the impact of climate change, but also research that can actually also help to mitigate the emission of gas in the atmosphere.
Thank you.
Can you just pull your shirt in a bit?
Yeah.
So moving on to, I have a question on funding. I noticed on IITA's website that there's an article on AflaSafe that says that more than half of the research and delivery projects to reduce hunger and improve livelihoods in Africa in IITA are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So I'd like to ask if you're concerned that one organization has such a dominant funding role, and how do you respond to the critics of the Green Revolution in Africa who say that it's essentially has failed?
Yeah, that's a very good question, also a very loaded question. I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for the support they're providing, the CGIAR, and to IIT in particular. The support that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is providing to the Institute dates back to 2011, when Mr. Gates visited the northern part of Nigeria and saw that aflatoxin was a problem for the people's health, the human health, when they consume maize or cassava. So he provided, through his foundation, some seed money to do research on how to combat aflatoxin. That's how IITA actually got involved in this particular area. Today, I'm proud to say that IITA has developed AflaSafe, which is a technology available, okay, a biological control technology to combat aflatoxin. And today, IITA has, made it available to private companies for more scaling up in different countries. I can mention about more than 10 countries where this is being developed. So I'm grateful to the foundation for that, and it continues to support it. And we had back in June, actually in Lagos, the visit of Mr. Gates to Nigeria, during which IITA actually presented some of the results. Now, on funding, I am, first to say that we need to be able to diversify the source of funding. The funding from the foundation is one source, but what I will be working on together with the scientists and the leadership of IIT and CGIAR is to diversify the source of funding so that we can actually scale up the type of research. So that's one point that I wanted to make. Now, you mentioned about the Green Revolution failing. That's not. I will beg to disagree with that. The Green Revolution of the type that we have had, especially in India and so on, is no longer relevant for Africa. At a time when it was based basically on one single commodity, and nobody cared about the environment. Today, the kind of green revolution we have had is completely not relevant. And now we are dealing with a complex system in Africa where you need to take into account, different the intercropping. You need to take into account the fact that there's an environmental degradation. You need to take into account the climate impact. So the GED Foundation is also supporting the AGRA, which is the African Green Revolution Agency, which is actually working with the private sector and community to try to make available technologies for farmers. So I wouldn't say that it has failed. To the contrary, I think it has actually made significant progress, and we are working with them to ensure that we respond to the needs of the farmers, the smallholder farmers in Africa that are constituting the bulk of the producers of food in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, my original question, I pointed out that your previous title was, in fact, well, your post at the moment, isn't it, until today, is Regional Director for Sustainable Development for West and Central Africa. So I was asking the question, there seems to be much more focus recently on regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices for Africa. And is this a real shift? And in practice, what does this mean for IITA and CGIAR?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. The fact that we have a focus on regenerative agriculture is an indication of the importance that people are giving to natural resource management, management of the ecosystem. In the current job where I am, this is exactly the area where we are working, ensuring that we also practice sustainable agriculture in a way that we can use the local technologies, to help improve food security in different countries where we are working. And I think that the CGIAR is already doing the research in this area. When I was a young scientist, we were already working on technologies like alley farming, alley cropping, all this is about the regenerative agriculture, where instead of having access to or looking for external input like chemical fertilizers, for those who cannot afford it, they could actually use the local material to be able to improve agricultural productivity. For example, association of a crop and livestock system using manure for crop for production of food is also a way that we can improve food productivity. So it is a recognition of the importance of managing natural resources in a sustainable manner.
Excellent, thank you so much. So the next question is also really related to this. So 6 months ago at the Dakar 2 summit on food sovereignty, Macky Sall, president of Senegal and the AU, said, quote, Africa must learn to feed itself. And he recommended that at least 10% of national budgets should be spent on agriculture. So bearing in mind the rapid expansion of Africa's population, have you seen any serious policy shifts for agriculture since then, since the Dakar 2 summit? Thank you.
I think I owe it to the leadership in Africa, and especially to the African Development Bank for leading that particular initiative. That was end of January 2023, and I was there. I participated in that. And indeed, there were over 34 head of state and head of government participating in this particular initiative, where all of them together, indicated that they need to shift, the game in their respective countries to ensure that resources are made available to support food security and food sovereignty. Why this won't happen? It all happened because in the wake of the Ukraine-Russia war, suddenly Africa realized that it was being too much dependent on the on Ukraine or Russia for its grain and fertilizer. And we know that we also have the capacity to be able to produce them locally. So they made a pledge. I think each country came with a compact in the sense that they have some targets and policy scenarios that they want to be able to put in place to be able to increase food production. I personally, chaired one of the compact meetings with the head of state, the head of Burundi, for example, together with his Minister of Agriculture, where we discussed how they will be able to support agriculture. As I'm going to IITA, as a Director General, and also as Director for CGI for Africa, I will be working together with the African Development Bank, the World Bank, other development agencies to ensure the implementation of the compact that were agreed upon in Dakar. So there's been a shift in terms of recognition of the importance of scaling up the funding in agricultural development. And today, we must say that the funding for agriculture is below the optimum, but the fact that the countries themselves are saying that they will be able to increase their funding, I think we need to help them move toward the target. So at this moment, we have fewer countries that are doing that, but I think that over the next few months or weeks, we should be able to get more countries focusing on increase the investment in agriculture and move toward the 10% target of budget to support agriculture.
Thank you. So on to our last question. And I think in the sense you were already beginning to answer that one too. What are your key messages then for governments, policymakers, and entrepreneurs in Africa?
Look, my key message is really simple one. I think the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking, and it is absolutely paramount, very important for African leaders to increase funding for agriculture. It is quite important. The bulk of the people, majority of people live in rural areas. That they need, that's where they get the jobs. And if there's investment is increased in agriculture and food security, it will go a long way to help improve the socio-economic condition of people in the rural areas, and then actually reduce rural-urban migration and improve the living condition of people. That's point number one. The point number two, I think, supporting ag research is quite important. Over and over, it has been shown that $1 invested in agricultural research brings $10 in terms of return. For the CGI, $1 invested brings $9 in return. What a very good investment. If you have that, I think anybody who will be able to have this kind of return on an investment will go into this area. So my recommendation would be to invest in agricultural research, in addition to investing also in rural, if you want, development, like the roads, the rural infrastructure, the storage, improving the policy environment is quite important also, reduce the distortions in agriculture. If we have and we focus together on these three areas, I think we'll go a long way to have a thriving rural sector, rural area in Africa, where people will be happy and have live in an environment where they will have access to the basic needs that they need instead of having the youth cross the Mediterranean and they try to go to Europe and so on to migrate. So these are my messages to the policymakers, and I will be working together with my colleagues in CGIAR in Africa, together with the scientists to make this happen in coordination also with the development agencies.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Ehui. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.